Hello everyone and welcome back to the Sherlock Holmes. Now I know a lot of you use these videos to sleep, so before you drift off I thought it would be a fun idea if everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world. Also like and subscribe if you are enjoying the case. Right? Let's get comfy and relax and let's begin. Story 1, we're diving into a case from a fascinating country. Argentina, a young, beautiful woman appeared to live an ordinary life with a bright future ahead of her. But after meeting a man 30 years her senior with a mysterious past, her life took a dark turn. What seemed like a romantic relationship quickly spiraled into a nightmare. The central figure in this case is Rosana Edith Galano, born in late 1978 in Buenos Aires province, Argentina. She was the youngest of 4 children born to Ronaldo Galano and Grael Noemi Rodriguez. Her siblings were named Monica Oscar and Gustavo. Though the family has been careful to keep details about Rosana's childhood and teenage years private, we do know that by the late 1990s she had graduated from high school at that time. Her father, Raldo, was working as a mechanic at a repair shop. This shop would become the setting for Rosana's fateful meeting with her future husband in early 2001. A customer named Jose Gento AR arrived at the shop. Jose was born on November the 22nd, 1948 in FEA, a city in the Tucumán province of Argentina. He was the son of Pedro Gento Arce and Elsa Tudia Aguilar. Jose had spent over 30 years living in Greece and the United States. During his time in the U.S., he served a 4-year prison sentence for drug trafficking. Although his mother remained in the U.S., Jose was forced to return to Argentina in 1996. By that time, he owned 8 properties in the upscale Barrio Norte district of the capital and was rumored to hold an engineering degree in his homeland. Jose was considered somewhat of a millionaire when Jose brought his vintage car to Ronaldo's shop for repairs. He and Rosen met despite their 30-year age difference. They quickly began dating. At the time, Rosen was unemployed and fairly reserved. Jose, on the other hand, appeared to be a wealthy man. However, his main source of income didn't come from the poultry and egg distribution company he ran, but rather from the money his mother, Elsa, regularly sent from the U.S. Not long after, when Jose came to ask for Rosana's hand in marriage, he was 52 years old and she was only 22. Graciela, Rosana's mother, asked Jose if he thought he might be too old for her daughter, but Jose confidently replied that love knows no age, to be sure. Before agreeing, her mother looked Rosana straight in the face in a soft and hesitant voice. Rosana said that she wanted to marry him with that answer. Rosana's parents respected their daughter's choice, but they advised her to think it through carefully. On the night of November 17, 2001, Jose and Rosana were married in a church. After just 7 months of dating, according to Jose, he won her over with his cheerful, modern, and intelligent personality. They married and initially had happy times together, and their first child, a son, was born. Shortly afterward, they named him Gono from that point on. However, those close to Rosana noticed the problems starting to surface. Jose was not only a controlling and jealous man who always wanted to know what Rosen was doing, but he also frequently showed disdain for her and her family. It was only a matter of time before these issues became physically evident, and indeed they did. Rosana had no voice in the relationship. Her freedom was taken away, and fear became her daily reality. Clearly, Jose fostered this fear because it ensured that he could maintain control and keep her obedient. In fact, Jose owned 2 guns, or at least that's what Rosana's family could confirm. He often flaunted them when guests came over or when he visited others. On one occasion, while Rosana's brother Oscar was helping paint her house, he witnessed Jose's physical violence toward his sister. Jose told Rosana to be quiet and then hit her. Another time, her father noticed a scratch on her back, and Rosana admitted that her husband had dragged her across the asphalt. Despite everything, the couple welcomed their second child, Nguyen. At this point, Rosana put all her energy into improving their relationship. Her goal was to provide a stable and secure home for her children. However, her sacrifices were constantly met with Jose's temper and disdain. To make matters worse, Jose's mother, Elsa, was the one who really held the power in the family. Despite living far away, she frequently visited them, though her stays in Argentina lasted no more than a month or a month and a half. During these visits, Elsa would dictate what Jose and Rosanna should do, and Jose would comply without much objection. Despite some occasional complaints, by 2006, Rosanna had reached her breaking point in April of that year. She finally gathered the courage to report Jose for domestic violence. At that time, she only felt safe when she was with her children, Jono and Nawan. Her family was unaware of the details of her situation, as Rosanna was very careful about what she revealed. A few months later, Rosanna filed a second report, which included a request for a forensic examination of her injuries, followed by several more similar complaints. By this time, Rosanna could no longer keep what she was enduring a secret and decided to confide fully in her sister, Monica. They agreed that Rosanna would call Monica whenever something happened, gradually but increasingly often. Rosanna leaned on her sister for support, and Monica became her refuge. When things became unbearable, Rosen would visit Monica's apartment in Ueno with Gono and Nawan. During these visits, Jose would dictate the time she needed to return home, always accompanied by threats of violence. If she disobeyed on other occasions, he would simply yell at her, accusing her of being useless and claiming that she was a terrible mother. Finally, Rosanna decided to move in with Monica, along with her children. Meanwhile, Jose remained at one of his properties, the fifth house he owned, called El Dozora, located in the town of Durca in Pará County. There he employed two workers, Paulo, age 35, and Gabriel Leguizamon, age 41. It seemed like things would calm down, but just a few months after their separation, Rosanna filed another complaint against her husband and requested a divorce from that point on. Jose was legally barred from approaching her. He was only allowed to be near Rosanna when exercising court-ordered visitation rights, which took place at a house he owned in the L.E. Romanzo residential area of Exaltación de la Cruz, a district in northeastern Buenos Aires province. It was at this location that Rosanna began to confide in the gardener, Daniel Gonzalez, about her nightmare. Daniel lived 4 blocks away, was married, and had a daughter. Some reports suggested that a secret romance had developed between Daniel and Rosanna, but this rumor was never confirmed. Meanwhile, Jose's threats continued to escalate. She even played a voicemail for her brother Oscar, in which Jose could be heard yelling about how he was going to end her life. Tensions remained high until mid-2007, while dining with friends at a pizza place. Rosanna met Oscar Lugo, referred to here by his full name to differentiate him from Rosanna's brother, who shares the same first name. Lugo was 32 years old, lived in Moreno, and worked in a sewing factory. It was love at first sight. They exchanged phone numbers and began dating. Lugo was an old-fashioned gentleman, polite, kind, attentive, and a good listener, qualities that stood in stark contrast to the violent, rude behavior of Rosanna's much older husband at the age of 29. After what felt like an endless series of storms, Rosanna suddenly seemed to reclaim a sense of happiness she thought she had lost forever. For his part, Oscar Lugo noticed Rosanna's lack of confidence, likely a result of the long period of fear she endured with her husband. In December 2007, Oscar celebrated the holidays with her, even dressing up as Santa Claus and one of the 3 wise men to entertain Gono and Nawan. But not everything was perfect for the couple, as Jose continued to keep tabs on Rosanna's every move. When Jose learned about Rosanna's new relationship and grew desperate over the impending divorce, he called her and offered to give her a car in exchange for breaking up with Oscar Lugo. Rosanna, of course, refused, and it was Oscar Lugo who took her to the hospital to see a psychologist. After she suffered a severe nervous breakdown when Jose ran out of options, he devised a plan with his cruel mother, Elsa. Once again playing the role of financier, after meticulously calculating every step, they hired a hitman whose identity remains an unsolved mystery to this day. On January 16, 2008, Rosanna and Monica went to El Romanzo to pick up the children. They had planned to get them in the afternoon, but Jose kept coming up with excuses to delay at 9:15 p.m. Rosanna's cell phone rang for the first time in a while. It was Jose claiming that Jono had a fever. He said he would take the boy to the hospital and return him the next day. However, Rosen was determined to pick up her children and care for Gono herself. The conversation lasted just 1 minute. Afterward, she went inside around 9:53 p.m. She sent a message to Oscar Lugo, simply a greeting and a reminder about the plans they had made for the next day at around 10 p.m. Rosanna and Monica were having dinner in the living room at 10:50 p.m. Rosanna's phone rang again. It was Jose on the other end, and their conversation would turn into a deadly trap. Rosanna answered the call, but due to poor reception, she stepped outside and into the garden to talk. At that moment, a shadow emerged from behind the thick trees and fired 4 shots at her. Monica screamed as she heard the gunfire. She saw her sister stumble and collapse in a panic. Monica rushed to find a cell phone to call 911, but couldn't connect. She then called her boyfriend and asked him to notify the police. Meanwhile, Oscar Lugo, completely unaware of what had just happened, tried to call Rosanna again at 11 p.m. As the police investigation led by Officer Alo Fernandez got underway, they discovered that the gunman had entered through a vacant lot adjacent to the house. A witness claimed to have seen the shooter escape through one of the gaps in the fence surrounding the neighborhood. He was wearing a t-shirt and shorts, but due to the darkness, nothing else could be made out. 3 MERS from Rosanna's body officers found spent shell casings. That same night, Jose was interrogated and he acted surprised. He later requested the services of a lawyer, delegating his representation to the attorney and leaving the scene the following day. During another search, a red sweater soaked in dew was found. According to Rosanna's family, the item belonged to Jose. In their view, there was no longer any doubt Jose was the prime suspect. The case attracted media attention and shocked the entire country. It became infamous when Jose and Elsa publicly smeared Rosanna, appearing on various TV channels to proclaim their innocence while disparaging the victim. Jose himself spread the claim that it was Rosanna's lovers who should be the primary suspects, since the incident Daniel the gardener had barely left his house or spoken to anyone on the night of Rosanna's final visitation. Ronaldo saw Jose nearby observing everything from a truck. However, Jose did not get out or approach to offer condolences or share. In the family's grief later, Jose's defense attorney targeted Monica, Rosanna's sister, and the sole eyewitness, casting doubt on her testimony. They argued it was suspicious that her clothes had no blood on them. They also highlighted that instead of helping her sister, Monica ran to find a phone. However, the theory that Monica had fired the gun was baseless. Investigators pointed out that the firearm was heavy and had a strong recoil, ruling out the possibility that the shooter was a woman. Another detail emphasized by prosecutor Marcelo Perisai and detectives from the Zara and Campana police departments was that anyone familiar with the house knew Rosanna had to go outside to get cell phone reception. This factor indicated that the crime had been meticulously planned while the investigation was ongoing. Jono and Gwen were placed in the care of their father and grandmother, Elsa. Although their grandmother, Grail, was allowed visitation rights, Monica and Oscar were denied access. Jose claimed there were serious safety concerns regarding his children, and the judges issued a restraining order barring them from contact. However, because the children were used to seeing their aunt, they expressed a desire to visit her. So Jose eventually relented and allowed them to occasionally see Monica, thanks to her persistent efforts with the National Family Bureau. Monica used those brief moments to take the kids to see a psychologist. After some time, Graciela was granted visitation rights but was not awarded custody in an interview. During that period, Jose claimed that Rosanna had 4 lovers, all of whom had legal issues. According to him, she became intimately involved with these men to learn their secrets, and Elle later threatened to expose them for her own benefit. Meanwhile, after receiving several threats, Oscar was declared a protected witness in his sister's case. As a result, he had to wear a tracking bracelet and was assigned police protection. The following months passed, and by the end of 2007, the court announced there was still no definitive evidence to identify any specific suspect among the many. In the case, the turning point Rosanna's family had been waiting for came a year after the events in January 28. Jose was arrested and charged with murder with 3 aggravating factors: the relationship to the victim, premeditation, and the involvement of 2 or more people. Brothers Pablo and Gabriel were identified by witnesses as the direct perpetrators of the killing. By Monday, January 28, 2008, interrogation hearings had begun. Jose complained that it had been a full year and 2 months since his wife's death. Before the prosecutor called him in for the first time, he was shocked that he had been switched from being considered a victim to a suspect in just 24 hours before the prosecution. Daniel the gardener testified the police had searched his home and confiscated his cell phone. Ronaldo, Graciela, Monica, and Oscar also detailed everything they knew about Jose's repeated threats, his violent behavior, and how he brandished weapons to intimidate others. Rosanna's mother even showed the prosecutor the last messages her daughter had sent her upon leaving the room. Ronaldo, the victim's father, stated over the past year, "I felt like I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders, but a sense of relief has finally settled over me. Knowing that I've done the right thing to honor my daughter's memory in the next hearing." Oscar Lugo was required to testify before prosecutor Marcelo without hesitation. He pointed out Jose's malicious actions, which were consistent with what Rosanna's family had previously described. He added, "Jose is trying to tarnish both my reputation and Rosanna's." He then revealed a crucial piece of information before her murder. Rosanna was convinced that the story about her having multiple lovers was part of Jose's strategy to leave her penniless. During the divorce proceedings in this context, Ramiro Rua Jose's attorney denied the accusations regarding his client's emotional instability and aggressive behavior, claiming that the story being presented was merely a one-sided account from Rosanna. By February 7, 2008, there was a 12-hour interrogation session. The final testimony before Pro's Compu Marcelo was from Elsa, who had flown in from the United States. Alongside this, a new search was conducted at El Romano, but no new evidence was uncovered at this point. Rosanna's family began to suspect Elsa's involvement in the plot. For this reason, Roberto Bavington, the lawyer representing Ronaldo and Graciela, announced that they were considering requesting Elsa's arrest in response. Claudia Zakim, Jose's lawyer and Elsa's legal advisor, stated that in her testimony, Elsa had made it clear that she had purchased the house for her grandchildren and understood that the division of assets following the divorce would not affect that property. Her stance was supported by her co-counsel Ramiro, who argued that it was entirely incorrect to suggest that Elsa and Rosanna had a poor relationship. As the case continued, Rosanna's murder and the conspiracy to eliminate her remained a topic of debate across Argentine news channels. The theory that Jose was the mastermind behind the crime with another perpetrator act on his behalf gained more traction. However, Jose was released on bail and continued to care for his children. Sometime later, the court ruled that the witness protection assigned to Oscar Lugo after he received threats was no longer necessary. He worked as a taxi driver in the Itongo area in the early hours of Saturday, July 5, 2008. He was ambushed by two armed men for an hour. They beat him and threatened to kill him when the taxi dispatch center lost contact with Oscar Elgo. They called for the intervention of police station number Cuatro in Moreno by tracking the signal emitted from the bracelet. Oscar Lug wore as part of the witness protection program. Authorities found him abandoned in a vacant lot in the area. While he didn't suffer any serious injuries, he was deeply shaken by the experience. Oscar's car was later found at the intersection of 25th Street and Arroyo Road. Commissioner Walter Estano of the Bus Arias police station issued a statement to the press regarding the incident. In addition to the pain of Rosanna's death and the ongoing struggle to secure custody of the children, Rosanna's family now faced a new wave of fear. This fear was not unfounded, but real and justified, with no perpetrators in custody and constant threats. The need for justice became more urgent than ever. However, the legal system seemed to move at a frustratingly slow pace. Years passed, and both the trial and the custody battle for Gono and Nan were delayed by 2012. For years after the attack on him, Oscar used his visitation rights to take the children to play soccer at a park in Castellar. He asked for a hug from them, knowing it would be one he would never forget. At that time, the children were 6 and S years old. Finally, in April 2013, the trial took place at the Criminal Court Number 1 in Campana, along with Jose, his mother Elsa, and the brothers Pau and Gabriel, all sat in the dock. However, despite several witnesses being called, none could identify the brothers Paulo and Gabriel as the culprits. There was no evidence placing them at the scene where Rosen was shot, either during or in the hours surrounding the attack. As a result, due to a lack of evidence, the court intervened and decided to acquit them. For her part, Elsa maintained her innocence. She stated that she never learned to hate or speak harshly, only to remain silent and respectful. Everyone knows why they choose to say or not say certain things. She said later during a hearing in May, Jose suffered a hemorrhagic stroke which further delayed the proceedings. It wasn't until November 2013 that the parties finally reconvened to hear the verdict. According to the judges, the way the attack on Rosen was planned and carried out showed clear signs of organized crime. Jose and Elsa had carefully selected the location in the day, knowing that if they called Rosanna's cell phone, she would step outside, making her vulnerable to a surprise attack. In the end, the court concluded that financial motives were also part of the reason for Rosanna's murder, as Jose did not want to share their joint assets. Jose and Elsa were both sentenced to life in prison when the Court of Appeals upheld their sentences. It emphasized Jose's repeated threats, the gender-based violence his wife endured, and the controlling influence Elsa had over her son. The verdict noted they had strong motives to kill the victim. The true perpetrator of the murder was never identified. However, in 2015, both Jose and Elsa were granted house arrest. Jose due to his stroke, and Elsa because of her age. Since then, Gono and Neuen had returned to live with Jose's family because of the strange circumstances surrounding the children's fate. The media continued covering the story for years. During that time, both Monica and Graciela were denied visitation with the children, who lived with their father's acquaintances and strangers. For Rosanna's family, the fight to reunite with the children became Oscar's driving force in life. By the age of 40, he had endured 9 years of watching his nephews live with Jose, the man who orchestrated their mother's murder. He persevered, determined to see progress in the case, knowing the value of patience better than anyone. In addition to his job as an electrical mechanic, Oscar began giving speeches to raise awareness about preventing crimes against women. His personal experience fueled his desire to ensure no other family would have to go through the same ordeal. But Oscar didn't stop at personal experience. He also took the time to educate himself on the law. In the second week of January 2017, the court finally allowed the children to stay with their maternal grandparents for the weekend. The Galano family repainted the front of their house, the living room, and one of the bedrooms, and gave the place a thorough cleaning on Friday. Oscar stayed at his parents' home in the town of Carros Buenos Aires until the last minute, making sure the computer was set up and everything was ready for the kids to use. He didn't want to miss any detail. They hung blue balloons at the door and made a colorful sign to welcome Nawen and Gono Graciela. Waited for her grandchildren with a homemade dish of Milanesa Neapolitana. That weekend, the Galano house was filled with joy. Nawen and Gono played soccer, ping pong, and video games with their cousins. They even insisted on sleeping in the same bed with their grandmother, whom they hadn't seen in over 2 years. On November 24, 2018, Jose passed away at Sanguinetti Hospital in Parar after suffering another stroke. This news was another shock for the children. They attended their father's funeral and later went to the cemetery. At one point, they pulled Monica aside, anxiously asking what would happen to them. Now, Monica, with as much calm and love as she could muster, reassured them that they would do whatever they wanted and promised to support them unconditionally. Both of them expressed a desire to live with Monica, and she asked them to inform their grandmother. Despite everything that had happened, and in order to protect the children, Rosanna's sister had to confront Elsa to explain Nawen and Gono's decision on this occasion. As on many others, it was clear that Monica always acted according to the children's wishes, whether it was listening to them when they wanted to talk or respecting their silence. Her main goal was to provide them with comfort and peace. By March 2019, Jono expressed that he didn't want to switch schools, as all his friends were in Parar and he only had 2 more years until graduation, so he returned to live with his grandmother, Elsa. Meanwhile, Monica filed for custody of Neuen at court number 5 in San Isidro. However, in the last week of November 2019, Elsa, who was then 87, was transferred from her home in Villa Eli to Sanguinetti Hospital in Parar. She passed away 3 days later on November 30th, the following month. Monica was granted custody of the younger child. Before the year ended, Gono moved in with a friend of his grandmother at that time. Both brothers still needed psychological support to process everything they had been through. Gano in particular struggled with some depressive issues. His psychologist told him there have been too many losses in a row. Just as you begin to recover from one another happens worse yet. In March 2020, right before the COVID-19 pandemic restrictions began, the person Jono was living with kicked him out, so the young man sought refuge at his Aunt Monica's house, where he stayed until October 2nd, 20. In November, he returned to Parar to live with Ignacio, a person his grandmother Elsa had appointed. As a caretaker, this arrangement lasted until March 2021, when Gono turned 18. At that point, he rented a small apartment and moved out on his own, living off the rental income from the properties his parents had left him. Meanwhile, Monica had already started the legal process regarding inheritance to ensure that nothing was taken from her nephews. It was a concern for her that someone might try to take away their assets. As for Nawin, his psychologist noted that he seemed emotionally stable thanks to the support he had received. In fact, he was enjoying a good social life. Jono's case was more complex in some ways. He struggled to come to terms with his reality. However, one thing he never lacked and would never be without was the unwavering support from his maternal family story. 2 will explore a shocking case that occurred in China in 2005. What seemed like a normal marriage between a successful businessman and a beautiful woman took a drastic turn after just 34 days. The 5-month pregnant wife suddenly vanished, leaving her husband in a state of panic and a trail of unanswered questions. What happened to this newlywed couple? Let's dive into today's case on June 18, 2015, around 10 p.m. A visibly distressed man rushed into the Nansen police station in Shenzhen. He hurriedly reported the mysterious disappearance of his wife. According to him, they had only been married for 34 days, but his wife was already 5 months pregnant. Her sudden disappearance, without a trace, left him feeling anxious, sensing the nature of the case. The police immediately suspected this could be a mysterious disappearance or have an unclear motive behind it. They quickly asked the man to provide all relevant details from the day events to his wife's recent relationships and behaviors, hoping to find any clues that could help solve the case. The man who reported the incident was Li Bing, the chairman of a large financial company based in Shenzhen with assets ranking among the top in the region. Not only was he famous in financial circles, but Li Bing also had significant social influence-making. His wife's disappearance, even more complex according to regulations. Investigations into adult missing persons usually have to wait 24 hours before proceeding. However, given Li Bing's status, the police immediately hypothesized that his wife Zhang Xuan might have been kidnapped for ransom. Recognizing the seriousness of the situation, they quickly deployed investigative measures to Zhang Xuan. Meanwhile, Li Bing was asked to return home and wait for news from the authorities, extremely worried about his wife. He had no choice but to put his trust in the police. Throughout the next day, he was consumed by fear and anxiety, waiting for police updates every minute by the following evening. Unable to wait any longer, he returned to the police station. The police said they had found Zhang Xuan's location. Li Bing felt a weight lift off his shoulders, but before he could breathe a sigh of relief, the police's next words plunged him into a nightmare, shattering all his hopes instantly. Initially, the police discovered that Zhang Xuan was still in Shenzhen, but the situation quickly became complicated when she crossed the border to Hong Kong shortly after she boarded an emergency flight to Los Angeles, USA. In just one day, the events left Li Bing in a state of shock and confusion just over a month after getting married. Why did his wife decide to leave without any explanation? His worries intensified when he discovered that Zhang Xuan had blocked all means of communication with him. Li Bing couldn't help but wonder if he had done something to anger her. Leading to this sudden decision to uncover the truth, Li Bing began meticulously recalling recent events. He tried to remember every small detail, from normal conversations to Zhang Xuan's actions that might have been overlooked. As Li Bing focused on these memories, a light suddenly flashed in his mind. Something important that he hadn't noticed before now became clear. His face slowly changed from confusion to fearful realization, and shock filled with worry, Li Bing hurried home. feeling as if he had just discovered a clue that could change everything upon arriving home. Li Bing quickly went to where he kept his valuable possessions, although he didn't intend to check immediately when he opened the safe. He instantly felt deeply disappointed. All important documents such as ID cards, passports, property, deeds, marriage certificates, travel permits for Hong Kong, and Mao house papers and household registration books had completely disappeared. Additionally, some gold and silver jewelry were also gone. This could only have been done by someone familiar with the house, someone who knew exactly where the assets were kept, and could do this without leaving any traces. At this moment, Li Bing couldn't help but face the cruel reality that his own wife, whom he had loved deeply, had deceived him so ruthlessly. Zhang Xuan hadn't disappeared, as he thought. In reality, she had secretly taken all his assets and vanished. The disappointment and shock made him wonder why Zhang Xuan chose to abandon their unborn child and leave him to run away. Persistent questions haunted Li Bing's mind. Li Bing recalled the time when he and Zhang Xuan met one evening. Li Bing attended a business event at a luxurious hotel in the city center. The party had a formal atmosphere, but wasn't much different from other events he had attended before. After exchanging a few words with partners, Li Bing began to feel tired and quite bored. Just then, a clear voice rang out in the middle of the party, catching Li Bing's attention. A young woman with a stunning appearance and striking presence was entering. It was Zhang Xuan. She appeared with captivating confidence, drawing the gaze of everyone in the room, including Li Bing, soon after Zhang Xuan approached him, smiling brightly and introducing herself as a customer, director at Shenzhen Construction Bank. She said she came to the party to expand relationships with potential clients and seek business cooperation opportunities. She handed Li Bing a business card with a professional demeanor while maintaining her unique charm. At this point, Li Bing was attracted by Zhang Xuan's confidence and elegance. He took the card from her hand and felt he wanted to talk more with this woman. Their conversations flowed smoothly and excitingly, making Li Bing feel the party had suddenly become much more interesting for him. This wasn't just a normal business networking event, but a memorable moment when he met Zhang Xuan, a woman who could make him feel attracted at first sight. While talking with Zhang Xuan, Li Bing gradually realized she was very different, unlike other women he had met. She not only possessed a confident, open demeanor, but what impressed Li Bing most was how she delicately cared for the person she was talking to. Each of her words was carefully chosen, creating a warm and comfortable conversation. Besides Zhang Xuan, he wasn't just listened to, but also understood this was important. Something very few people could do before leaving Li Bing and Zhang Xuan exchanged WeChat information. Although the meeting was quite brief, it left him feeling intrigued and curious. Despite having a very good impression of her with his busy work schedule, Li Bing quickly returned to his routine. As for Zhang Xuan, she didn't actively contact him either. Gradually, that meeting faded in his mind, becoming a beautiful but short memory that he thought he had forgotten about a month later. Li Bing unexpectedly received a WeChat message from Zhang Xuan. Just 2 words hello appeared on the screen, making him hesitate momentarily, intending to ignore it without much thought. However, the profile picture showing the delicate face of the girl he met at the party unconsciously pulled him back. Curiosity suddenly flared up in his mind, prompting his fingers to touch the screen. Zhang Xuan only sent a simple greeting to Li Bing, and then tactfully expressed her hope to have a chance to cooperate with him in the future, although the conversation was brief. Her natural and graceful way of speaking made Li Bing feel a sense of warmth and closeness. Zhang Xuan's sweet words were like a gentle breeze passing through Li Bing's mind, stirring up an indescribable feeling of attraction. Zhang Xuan's friendliness and grace made Li Bing increasingly close to her. In the following days, Zhang Xuan frequently contacted Li Bing, talking not just about work, but also about many other issues. They occasionally went out to eat together and enjoyed happy moments together. Li Bing wasn't oblivious to Zhang Xuan's intentions. She was young, beautiful, and intelligent, and also showed sincere admiration for him. This attention made him unable to refuse and gradually feel attracted by her closeness and sophistication. The relationship between the two increasingly progressed well. Li Bing later learned that they were both from Tangzhen. Moreover, they both graduated from Wuhan University. These commonalities seemed like a thread of destiny connecting them, making Li Bing gradually feel a special bond with Jiang Xuan. The joy made her no longer hide. Jiang Xuan revealed her fragile and vulnerable sides as if finding a place to rely on in this man. Once, after having a few drinks, Jiang Xuan was slightly tipsy and began to talk about her past. She recounted that when she was only 3 years old, her parents divorced, being a girl. She was abandoned and neglected by both. Eventually, she was adopted by an elderly couple. Although living in poverty, the couple always loved and cared for her like their own child to not let them down. Jiang Xuan was determined to study hard and got admitted to Wuhan University. After graduation, she came to Shenzhen on her own to establish a career, wishing to repay the kindness she had received since childhood. Although everyone admired Jiang Xuan for her resilience in changing her fate, by her own strength, deep inside, she always had to face loneliness and bitterness that only she could understand. Jiang Xuan confided in Li Bing about her past, her eyes seeming to sink into tear-filled memories. Suddenly, she couldn't control her emotions and burst into tears. Silent tears rolled down, making the atmosphere heavy at this moment. Li Bing couldn't sit still anymore. He stepped forward and gently embraced her in his arms. Jiang Xuan leaned on his shoulder, her tears still not stopping, but her heart felt a different warmth. They looked at each other in a moment of silence, and from then on, Li Bing and Jiang Xuan officially became a couple. His eyes looked at her full of love and determination to protect this girl. After some time together, Jiang Xuan became an important part of Li Bing's life every day. She cared for and inquired about him, never missing any opportunity to make him feel loved. Sometimes she would come to Li Bing's house, spending time cooking dishes. Li Bing liked cleaning the kitchen and arranging everything neatly. Li Bing felt a genuine warmth from Jiang Xuan that he had been lacking in his many years of living alone. Her devoted care revived the feeling of family that he thought he had long forgotten. In November 2015, Jiang Xuan, with determined eyes, told Li Bing about her wish to move in and live together. Li Bing was a bit surprised, but didn't hesitate to immediately agree with Jiang Xuan. He also felt happy to have her by his side. Not long after Jiang Xuan moved in with Li Bing, she began to get busy with bank work. The pressure of work made her unable to spend as much time caring for Li Bing as before. Li Bing also understood the current situation and always loved, cared for, and sympathized with her. The shared life of Li Bing and Jiangshu Dan was very sweet. Jiangshu Dan, with her gentleness and care, created a living environment that made Li Bing, who had been single for many years, feel happy and comfortable. Li Bing was 10 years older than Jiang Xuan, but the age difference didn't create a gap. Instead, it added to the warmth in their relationship. After some time, Jiang Xuan decided to quit her bank job to spend time taking care of Li Bing, from preparing meals to paying attention to every detail in his daily life. Jiang Xuan's weekdays didn't have much to do, so she often used her free time to go shopping when Jiangshu licked the luxury item she just needed to give Li Bing a little hint, and he would easily pay for her to buy it. Li Bing's generosity made Jiang Xuan feel loved one day when Li Bing just returned home. After a stressful day at work, he saw Jiang Xuan waiting for him right at the door with an excited and thrilled expression. Jiang Xuan rushed to Li Bing when he entered the house. She smiled radiantly and announced that she was pregnant. This good news made Li Bing extremely happy. He couldn't believe his ears mixed emotions flooding his heart. Seeing Li Bing's joyful reaction, Jiang Xuan also felt very satisfied at this moment. She quickly proposed something important. Marriage. Jiang Xuan stood in front of Li Bing with a hopeful smile, while Li Bing looked at her quite calmly when hearing Jiang Xuan's proposal for marriage. Li Bing became more silent. Having gone through many difficult years to rise from humble beginnings, he knew that marriage wasn't just about the feelings between two people, but also affected property issues. Therefore, Li Bing said that marriage couldn't be rushed and both of them needed to consider carefully. Jiang Xuan noticed the seriousness in Li Bing's words. However, she didn't show anger, but instead showed understanding and advised him not to worry too much. Jiang Xuan was not only knowledgeable, but also understanding in Li Bing's heart. The trust in his relationship with Jiang Xuan became increasingly solid, although they couldn't get married. Immediately, Lebing was still willing to support Jiang Xuan materially. He believed that with their child, together becoming a family was just a matter of time. After a few weeks together, Jiang Xuan suddenly informed Lebing that her grandmother was in critical condition, so she needed to return home to visit her. Although Lebing very much wanted to go back to her hometown with her, he was too busy with work and couldn't go with her. He gave her a credit card and hoped she would feel more at ease when taking care of her family afterwards. Jiang Xuan stayed in her hometown for over a month during this time. Lebing called many times to check on her and hoped she would return soon, but every time she burst into tears because her grandmother's health condition still hadn't improved, and the credit card he gave her was almost out of money. Her voice was full of worry and fatigue, making Lebing feel heartache. Immediately after hanging up the phone, he immediately transferred her a large sum of money, hoping this would help reduce her burden somewhat. Not long after returning, Jiang Xuan continued to mention marriage to Lebing. This time, she not only talked about the future, but also emphasized that the child in her womb was growing, and her family back home was also starting to worry about her stability. They wanted her to have a happy family life. Soon, these words Lebing, unable to keep his calm as before thinking about the child about to be born and wanting a stable life. He agreed to Yang Shen's marriage proposal in a short time. After that, they completed the marriage registration procedures and officially became a legal couple after the wedding. Jiang Xuan expressed her wish to buy a house in her hometown so her grandparents would have a more comfortable place to live. This request came from filial piety, so Lebing didn't hesitate to agree. He decided to spend 500,000 yuan, about $77,000, to buy a house in Hanzhong. He even suggested putting both their names on the property ownership papers as an expression of sincere love and long-term commitment in their relationship. He hoped their life would become increasingly happy in the future. One day, Jiang Xuan proposed buying another house for the two of them because she wanted them to have their own private space. Lebing saw the longing in Jiang Xuan's eyes, and she was also carrying his child. So he immediately agreed. He paid a down payment of 7 million yuan, about $1.08 million, to buy a house worth 30 million yuan, about 4.62 million in the Nan'an area. And of course, this house was in Yongshan's name a few weeks after buying the house. Jiang Xuan said she didn't want to stay at home as a housewife anymore and wanted to help Lebing make money. She asked Lebing to transfer more money so she could start an online business. Seeing his wife's determination, Lebing didn't hesitate to withdraw 2.74 million yuan, about $422,000, from his savings and transfer it to Jiang Xuan's account. Immediately after receiving the money, she quickly prepared to go out to make a certificate of deposit at the bank and told Lebing she would buy some food to prepare dinner. Lebing offered to go with her. Online community, these fake posts and information not only damaged Lebing's reputation, but also threatened his company from a respected and successful person. Bing now faced harsh criticism from public opinion. His reputation was tarnished and his career became the target of false information attacks. All his efforts to restore his honor and regain justice seemed futile when faced with Jiang Xuan's sophisticated schemes. While Lebing was fighting to reveal the truth and protect his reputation, Jiang Xuan continued to rely on social media to reinforce her image as an oppressed victim facing a crisis of honor and career. Lebing not only had to deal with personal betrayal, but also fight a complex media battle. Jiang Xuan not only showed no remorse, but also deliberately slandered Lebing. At this point, his anger surged more intensely than ever. Before pushed into such a situation, he could do nothing but intensify his investigation efforts. This process lasted for 5 grueling years during that time. After giving birth, Jiang Xuan began a life of constant hiding. She continuously moved to avoid the private detective Lebing hired, making it extremely difficult to track her down. Each of Lebing's advances was overshadowed by Jiang Xuan's intelligence and cunning, making the pursuit increasingly tense and exhausting. Finally, after years of relentless investigation, Lebing learned a painful truth: the child Jiang Xuan had given birth to was not his. Instead, the child's father was Lin Chen, a member of her fraud gang. Lin Chen was not only the child's father, but also a key accomplice who had helped Zhang Shu and carry out a series of illegal property transfers. This discovery not only made Li Bing collapse from the pain of betrayal, but also revealed the truth about the sophisticated fraud network Zhang Xuan had painstakingly built. Each piece of the story made him increasingly realize the cruelty of the trap he had unwittingly fallen into after discovering the truth about Lin Chen. Li Bing immediately changed his tactics. Instead of continuing to pursue aggressively, he decided to mislead the enemy by pretending to be desperate and declaring defeat. He appeared tired and hopeless, no longer hiring people to follow them, but instead waiting for the right opportunity, believing that Li Bing had truly given up. Lin Chen carelessly returned to Shenzhen to prepare to sell the house in the Nansen area that he held, however. As soon as Lin Chen set foot back in his hometown, he had no idea that he had fallen into the perfect trap set by Li Bing and the police. As soon as he arrived in Shenzhen, Lin Chen was immediately surrounded and arrested by the police, ending the Fuji life of the accomplice in this sophisticated fraud case. When Lin Chen was arrested, Zhang Xuan became panicked, knowing that there was no one left to rely on. She began to feel loneliness enveloping her in a foreign land. Her life now consisted of long days of hiding from Los Angeles to the desolate desert areas of the Philippines during her escape. Zhang Xuan changed her identity and tried to start a new life. She quickly approached and seduced a man, hoping he would be a companion to help her escape the encirclement of those hunting her. However, she had no idea that the man had been bought off by Li Bing's private detective beforehand. All her movements and locations were under control and closely monitored. Finally, with the support of international police and Li Bing's relentless efforts, Zhang Xuan was arrested at a small airport just as she was about to leave the United States. Once again, Zhang Xuan had spent 5 consecutive years living in hiding, but eventually she couldn't escape the punishment of the law. After a long search, she was arrested and brought to trial in the U.S. and sentenced to 65 years in prison. She will spend the rest of her life in the Tucson Women's Prison located on the border of Arizona, a remote and isolated place. Zhang Shan's extraordinary intelligence and determination in rising from a girl with difficult circumstances to an excellent university student cannot be denied, but instead of using those qualities to do good things, she chose the path of deception and greed. However, no matter how intelligent and cunning she was, she would eventually face the appropriate punishment of the law for the actions she had committed. Story 3 will delve into a case where the perpetrator's methods were incredibly sophisticated. On April 11, 2006, on the 15th floor of the Lincoln apartment complex in Shiji District, New Taipei City, Taiwan. A resident on the top floor smelled a strong gas odor coming from a neighboring apartment. After knocking on the door with no response, the concerned resident immediately called the police, fearing a gas leak or burst pipe. When police and firefighters arrived and forced entry, a horrifying scene greeted them. The homeowner, Miss Kai Tingu, and her 2 daughters were found neatly dressed, lying motionless on the bed without any signs of life. Police discovered that all doors and windows were sealed shut, with the main door locked from the inside. All window cracks were stuffed with fabric on the gas stove in the kitchen. A kettle had boiled dry. From this, police initially concluded that the deaths were caused by gas poisoning after water, and the kettle boiled over, extinguishing the flame and causing a gas leak. Given the scene, this appeared to be a family tragedy. It seemed that the homeowner, Caillou, might have been responsible. Investigation revealed that Caillou had separated from her husband, Zhang Haoling, due to his infidelity and failure to provide for the family she relied on, selling essential oils, direct market marketing, and odd jobs to support herself and her 2 daughters. Thus, police speculated that emotional turmoil and financial difficulties may have driven Caillou to desperation. However, after investigation and interviews, neighbors didn't believe she would do this to her children. Moreover, her parents disagreed with the police's hypothesis. They stated that their daughter was a strong person who wouldn't give up due to temporary difficulties, and certainly wouldn't take her children with her. Furthermore, they had spoken to Caillou on the phone the night before the incident, and she showed no unusual signs. Therefore, at the request of Caillou's parents, the police conducted autopsies on all 3 victims. The forensic autopsy report was quickly released, as her parents had predicted. The case took a completely different turn from initial speculation. According to the autopsy report, all three victims showed signs of having their mouths and noses covered. If the mother had done this herself, the marks on the daughters might be explicable, but the fact that Kai Tingu herself had these marks was puzzling. How could she have done this to herself? It clearly didn't make sense. Another crucial clue was that the carbon monoxide levels in all three victims' bodies were much lower than lethal doses. Moreover, traces of ethyl ether were found in their systems. Ethyl ether, also known as anesthetic ether, can cause unconsciousness in daily life. This substance is rarely encountered and difficult for ordinary people to access. These clues indicated that this was not an act by Caillou herself, but actually a homicide. Therefore, the police returned to the scene for further investigation. However, this investigation only made the case more mysterious. At the scene, police found no suicide note or any items containing ethyl ether. They collected every bottle of essential oil in the house for testing, but no traces of ethyl ether were found. This meant that not only were there no traces of the perpetrator, but the murder weapon had also been removed. This case resembled a locked room. Murder mystery from detective novels. Although they knew the victims hadn't committed suicide, the police couldn't provide evidence of murder. The case reached a dead end and the police had to set it aside. In a pile of unsolved cases for a whole year, one-day prosecutor Lin Hongsong received a new assignment faced with over 300 unresolved case files. He felt overwhelmed and didn't know where to start. Unexpectedly, he caught a whiff of jasmine fragrance. Following the scent, he discovered a file under the cabinet as if by fate. This file was the Kai Tingu family massacre case. The scent came from a bottle of essential oil preserved as evidence. The prosecutor immediately read through the file and quickly noticed several suspicious points. But why had this case file been sealed? This puzzled him. Therefore, Lin Hongsong immediately decided to reopen the investigation as a homicide case. Typically, a murder case has three main motives: love, hate, or money. From the on-site investigation, Kai Ting-Yu's home showed no signs of being ransacked and nothing was missing, so the financial motive could be ruled out. The victim had simple social relationships, no enemies at work, and good relationships with neighbors and relatives, so the revenge motive could also be eliminated. Regarding relationships, the only person with conflicts with the victim was Zhang Heiling, her husband. In fact, during the initial investigation, Zhang Heiling had been questioned by the police, but at that time, the police simply thought, how could a father be so cruel as to kill his own children? Finally, in the absence of any other evidence, they did not investigate further. Zhang Heiling had left Taiwan for mainland China. Not long after the incident occurred, time was of the essence. Lin Hongsong first requested insurance information for Kai Ting-Yu and her two daughters. The results showed that the sole beneficiary was Zhang Heiling, and just a week after his wife and children's deaths, he had filed an insurance claim normally when losing 3 loved ones. In one night, most people would be immersed in grief and busy with funeral arrangements. How could one have the mindset to rush to claim insurance? This behavior of Zhang Heiling was truly suspicious. Additionally, the testimony of the victim's parents further led the prosecutor to suspect that this husband had a clear motive for the crime. Q's parents stated that their son-in-law was unfaithful, often didn't come home at night, and didn't provide money for their daughter. He even beat his wife. The police had also recorded Zhang Heiling's history of domestic violence. Once during an argument, he directly destroyed his wife's motorcycle from any angle. Zhang Heiling had motives for the crime. However, although Zhang Heiling was the main suspect, he was now in mainland China. Without evidence, they couldn't charge him regarding the investigation of this case. The police at the Shaji District Police Station were very passive. They had thought a lot, but still couldn't come up with a reasonable explanation for this strange stalker murder case. Therefore, they could only try to persuade prosecutor Lin Hongsong not to waste any more time on this case. Several months passed, but the case made no progress, feeling anxious. Prosecutor Lin Hongsong sought help from Liang Ji, the deputy director of the Criminal Investigation Bureau. The Criminal Investigation Bureau in Taiwan is mainly responsible for major and important cases with the spirit of responsibility and mission of a police officer. Liang Ji agreed to Lin Hongsong's request. Subsequently, they formed a special task force. The first thing they needed to do was return to the crime scene to see if they could find any overlooked clues. Liang Ji first recreated the situation when entering the crime scene, and indeed they discovered an important clue. They found that although all doors and windows in the house were closed and the main door was locked, only the balcony door was unlocked. Kai Yu's apartment was on the floor just below the building's top floor. If someone intended to break in, they could easily climb down from the top floor into the apartment. Zhang Heiling had previously worked installing outdoor air conditioners, so this operation would have been easy for him. Moreover, the iron-clothes drying rack outside the balcony was installed by him after decoding this mystery. The next step was to find valid evidence. Unfortunately, the task force could hardly find any usable evidence. The initial police officers had not collected hair samples from the bed in time, nor had they checked locations that might have retained skin cells from the suspect, such as under the victim's fingernails. Although there was an interrogation record of Zhang Heiling at that time, he only answered, "I don't know," to most questions, so it was of no help to the case. Therefore, the task force decided to re-arm the neighbor who had called the police this kind woman. Although somewhat dissatisfied with the passive work attitude of the police, initially was willing to share all the information she knew when she saw how active the task force was. She said she had a very good relationship with Kai Yu, occasionally helping her look after her 2 daughters. Later, Zhang Heng's affair became so public that everyone knew about it. The day before the incident, she had seen a man wearing a raincoat and helmet going up the stairs. She found this person very suspicious, so she asked the building manager to keep the surveillance video footage of this image and provide it to the police. Receiving this unexpected information, the members of the task force were extremely excited. This could be a crucial breakthrough. It seemed that the case finally had hope of being solved. The task force members immediately went to look for this important video, but strangely they couldn't find it undeterred. They went to Shaji District Police Station and invited the police officers who had previously handled the case to come back and help with the search. Finally, they found this hard drive in a deep drawer. However, to everyone's disappointment, due to poor storage, the hard drive had been damaged by moisture and the images could not be viewed. Lianga searched all major and minor hard drive manufacturers, spending tens of thousands of new Taiwan dollars, but still couldn't recover the data. Unfortunately, this valuable clue was lost. Frustrated and angry, they thought long and hard and decided to shift their investigation. Focus to Zhang Heiling's lover. If this case occurred due to infidelity, then theoretically this lover might know something immediately. Prosecutor Li Hongsong used the reason that call records showed the suspect had met his lover the day before. The incident with this somewhat forced reason, he applied to the court for permission to wiretap Zhang Heiling's lover. Speaking of this Su Yuxian, she and the Zhang Heiling couple lived in the same area. She had been married several times, then completely let herself go. She frequently had relationships with multiple men simultaneously and changed boyfriends constantly. In 2004, Zhang Heiling and Su Yan's husband took on a project together. Afterwards, they often invited each other to play Mahjong. During this time, Zhang Heiling got to know the 26-year-old Su Yan. Subsequently, these two quickly developed feelings for each other. They weren't shy about renting a place outside to live together and began their shameless affair. Until January 2005, Kenu discovered their illicit relationship. She had an argument with Su Yan in the residential area. Afterwards, she even called Su Yuan's husband, asking him to control his wife and not let her continue to seduce her husband. Swan initially just wanted to seek excitement and had no intention of divorcing, but when the illicit relationship was exposed, she had to divorce her husband. Therefore, she deeply resented Kingu. Although this case had many suspicious points, the initial investigation ended without results afterwards. Zhang Heiling also broke up with her and went to mainland China. Su Yuan thought these matters no longer concerned her. However, who would have thought that 2 years later the case would be reopened for investigation? The task force even intervened in Su Yuan's life. Even summoning her faced with questions from the task force, Swan asserted that she and Zhang Heiling were not close and were just card-playing friends a few times. She even said that she had many men pursuing her, and Zhang Heiling's conditions weren't very good, so she didn't pay much attention to him. Swan appeared very calm, but in reality she was terrified. Inside, through wiretapping, the police learned that she kept calling Jang Holling, but he always refused this. Increased her anxiety even more. In addition, the task force discovered that Jang Holling had called a close friend after investigation. They found that a car and a SIM card registered under this friend's name were both used by Jang Holling. The car was sold on the second day after the incident. The call history of the SIM card showed that at the time of the incident, Jang Holling was still in constant contact with Swan, and the location of the SIM card at that time was exactly at the Lincoln apartment complex where Caillou was living. All this information showed that Su Yuin was lying. Therefore, the task force informed Swan that according to procedure, she needed to come to the Criminal Investigation Bureau for a lie detector test. It's hard to say whether Suin was smart or foolish, but to pass this lie detector test, she even used her connections to ask the police how to invalidate the lie detector test. Not only that, to better cope with interrogation, she even went online to search for the uses of ethyl ether in daily life. But she didn't expect that these actions she thought were clever would become her biggest slip-ups, because everything she did was known to the task force on the day of the lie detector test. Swan thought she was well prepared, but she still couldn't avoid feeling apprehensive. She naively thought it would be best to run away, but Swan was quickly caught and brought to the police station afterwards. The police found many intimate photos of her with John Healing on her home computer. The browser history also had many records of searching for information related to immigration. Moreover, she had once bought ethyl ether from an online friend in Kong and said it was used to clean her boyfriend's skin. All the evidence gathered by the task force had exposed all of Jean Hing's lies. On the other hand, as the biggest suspect, the task force was also trying to figure out how to lure Jean Healing back to Taiwan. Coincidentally, it had been nearly 2 years since Jan Healing filed the insurance claim. Therefore, the task force pretended to be insurance company employees and called him, asking him to quickly return to complete the procedures before the insurance contract expired. At this time, Yang Hing's older brother knew that the case had been reopened for investigation, so he angrily called the police to question why this case was still not closed. The task force took advantage of this opportunity and told Yang Hing's brother, "As long as your brother passes the lie detector test, we will immediately close the case." Therefore, the older brother, trusting his younger brother, urged Zhang Helling to return to Taiwan for the lie detector test. After receiving the call, Zhang Helling finally breathed a sigh of relief. This case had not been solved for 2 years, and it seemed that the police had not found any clues or evidence. Moreover, he could receive a large insurance payout. It was too good to be true. Therefore, he finally flew back to Taiwan, falling into the big trap that the task force had prepared for him. As soon as the plane landed, Zhang Healing was immediately arrested and taken to the police station for interrogation, but at this time he still maintained a tough attitude, claiming that he was also a victim because he had lost his 2 daughters and denied all suspicions raised by the police. Seeing that the suspect was quite stubborn, the task force turned their attention to Swan. They put strong pressure on her. First, they exposed her lies to shake her and reminded her that doing so would result in charges of perjury. Then they presented the search results, asking why she had searched for information related to ethyl ether. Finally, they added the final piece of evidence that the time and location of her calls with Zhang Healing completely matched the time and location of the incident with such clear evidence. Su Yujin could no longer pretend she requested to apply the Witness Protection Act to reduce her sentence, allowing her to become a guilty witness to obtain her testimony and catch all the criminals. The task force agreed to her request in her testimony. Swan tried her best to shift responsibility away from herself. She told the task force that all of this was planned and executed by Zhang Healing. She even said that she had advised him over the phone not to act impulsively. The police had obtained Su Yuan's testimony and only lacked Zhang Hing's confession team. Leader Lei Yangji gave Zhang Healing the transcript of Su Yuan's testimony and played the Great Compassion mantra in the interrogation room. Then he took out photos of the 2 children, placed them in front of Zhang Healing, and said emotionally, "Let's pause the interrogation. Now, whether you did it or not, let's close our eyes and pray for the 3 deceased." This approach completely broke Zhang Healing down. He burst into tears. Seeing this, Lei Yangji immediately shouted, "Are you a human?" a ghost or a beast. Zhang Healing, hitting his own head while crying, said, "I am a beast controlled by an evil spirit." Afterwards, he confessed to all his crimes. The actions of this immoral couple were said to make even experienced police officers shudder under police escort. Zhang Heling returned to the crime scene to reenact the entire process of the crime. It turned out that to take revenge on Kenu Su Yuan and Zhang Heling frequently displayed their affection openly. In 2006, Kaiden Yu had proposed divorce, but because they couldn't agree on alimony issues, the divorce case was still ongoing, but even so, Swan was still not satisfied. She constantly incited Zhang Heling to kill his wife and declared, "If you're a real man, kill her, or don't stay with me anymore." Based on their economic situation, at the time, it's highly likely that she instigated Zhang Heling to purchase accident insurance. Zhang Heling had lacked proper guidance since childhood, with a personality lacking in self-direction and easily influenced by others. Married life quickly became boring for him since his affair with Swan. This different, exciting life intrigued him, but he was also tightly controlled by Swan and followed all her decisions. However, Swan didn't care about his feelings at all, even meeting other men privately in the apartment they rented. Under this woman's urging, the two began preparing for the murder. First, they went to Kaung to buy ethyl ether from an online friend and took a trip while at it. Then they went to a pet store to buy a white mouse to test the effects of ethyl ether. Finally, they went to a mountaineering equipment store to buy rope and other tools, but when it came time to carry out the plan, Zhang Heling hesitated. He found all sorts of reasons to delay, proposing to wait until the children were on summer vacation and send them to their grandparents' house before acting, etc. But Sujan couldn't wait that long. She threatened to break up if Zhang Heling didn't act quickly. So in the early morning of April 11th, 2006, Zhang Heling brought the murder weapons and took advantage of the building manager's absence to sneak up. He climbed down from the top floor to his wife's bedroom and called Swan to directly report the scene, showing his determination and love. He used a cloth soaked in ethyl ether to tightly cover his wife's mouth and nose after a brief struggle. Kaiden Yu passed out only when he was sure his wife was dead. Did Zhang Heling remove the cloth at this point? Sujan on the other end of the line praised him for doing a good job. Initially, Zhang Heling had no intention of killing his two daughters, but when he returned to the living room, his older daughter had woken up to use the bathroom. The girl surprisingly asked Dad, "What are you doing?" fearing discovery. Zhang Heling coaxed his daughter back to bed, then said, "Daddy is sorry." Afterwards, he used the same method to take the lives of his two daughters. Only at this point did Swan on the other end ask why he had acted against the children. But Zhang Heling replied, "If I don't kill them, who will take care of them after killing all three?" Zhang Heling followed the initial plan to stage the scene as a suicide. He covered all three with blankets, then used a toilet brush to clean Kaiden Yu's fingernails, where there might have been traces left when she struggled and scratched him after cleaning everything up. It was around 4 a.m. He climbed back up to the top floor the same way and called Swan to report that he had completed the mission. Afterwards, Zhang Heling threw the murder weapons into the trash and burned them. What's even more infuriating is that right after killing his wife and children, he rushed back to the rented apartment to spend the night with Su Yan. However, ironically, this man who sacrificed everything for true love made Sujan feel bored after just half a year. She not only brought other men home, but also demanded that J.N. Heling not enter the house without permission, only allowed to return when she called because he was discarded, and to evade police investigation, Zhang Heling fled to mainland China to make a living in March 2009. Zhang Heling was sentenced to death twice for killing his daughters and given a life sentence for killing his wife. Combined all charges, he was finally sentenced to death with limited possibility of commutation. His accomplice Su Yuan was also sentenced to 15 years in prison after the appeal trial. Zhang Heling's sentence remained unchanged, while Su Yuan, as a guilty witness, had her sentence reduced to 10 years and began serving her term. But unexpectedly, by 2016, Zhang Heling still hadn't been executed. He wrote in prison that he only wished to die, but after 6 trials, the Supreme Court again overturned the death sentence and changed it to life imprisonment. The reason was that the judge believed after committing such a serious crime when watching TV in prison and seeing images of children, he showed signs of avoidance and psychological weakness, indicating clear signs of remorse. Additionally, the main reason he acted so cruelly was largely due to Su Yuan's instigation. Therefore, the judge concluded that Zhang Hing's conscience wasn't completely lost and he still had the potential to reintegrate into society. This result can be said to have angered many people. How can 3 lives be forgiven if one has committed an unforgivable crime? What is there to talk about rehabilitation? As Lianga said in a later interview, the law stipulates the death penalty. If judges don't want to impose the death penalty, please resign. Don't continue working because you have betrayed this responsibility. In this case, if Zhang Heling was the knife, then Su Yuan was the hand wielding the knife. She controlled the entire course of events, being the most terrifying person in the whole case, but now this evil woman has served her sentence and been released, causing great indignation. Although the perpetrators in this case were ultimately not executed, when night falls, can they really sleep soundly? Story 4. Today's story took place in an apartment in Songpa district located in the southeastern part of Seoul, South Korea, on the 7th floor of an apartment building in Sapa district. There was a small family of 4 living happily. The husband, Kim Bong-jae, 34 years old, was an employee of a listed company. The wife, Park Ji-ai, 31 years old, was a homemaker. The couple were college sweethearts who married shortly after graduation. They had a 3-year-old son and a 10-month-old daughter. While Kim Bong-jae was the breadwinner, his wife focused on taking care of their home. This clear division of roles brought happiness to the family. However, a horrific incident in 2003 completely upended their peaceful life at around 7 p.m. on December the 29th. 2003, Kim Bong returned home from work as usual. Since his wife was typically at home, he was accustomed to not carrying his keys that day. As always, he arrived at his front door and rang the doorbell, but after waiting for a while without his wife answering, he knocked and called her name several times. But strangely, there was still no response. At this point, he began to feel worried. His wife, Park Ji-ai, was a full-time homemaker who usually stayed home to care for their 2 young children at this time. On most days, she would be waiting for Kim Bong to return home for dinner and rarely went out yet. Today, she wasn't home and the children seemed to have been taken out as well. Kim Bong-jae then called his wife's close friend Lee Young-gi to ask if his wife was with her. Lee Young-gi, also 31 years old, was Park Ji-ai's high school classmate. After graduation, they reconnected at a class reunion, and Lee Young, he had moved to live near Park Ji's home due to their close proximity and friendship. Lee Young-gi visited Park Ji home 3 to 4 times a week. However, Lee Young-gi said that Park Ji wasn't at her place and she didn't know where she was after hanging up. Lee Young-gi immediately left her home and came to Park Ji's apartment. She also tried ringing the doorbell and knocking, but there was no response. Then she and Kim Bong tried to look inside through a small window in the hallway through the gap in the security grill. Although Park Ji wasn't visible in the bedroom, they saw her handbag still on the table near the window, knowing that Park Ji-a usually kept her keys in her handbag. Lee Young-gi and Kim Bong Jae managed to pry open the window and reach through the security grill to grab the bag. They found the keys inside and opened the door upon entering the apartment. They found it eerily quiet after searching. They quickly discovered Park Ji-ai hanging at the bedroom door. An orange clothesline was around her neck with one end tied to the door, and her face was covered by her long dress pulled up. She showed no signs of life at this sight. Kim Bong-jae was in shock, not knowing what to do, while Lee Young-go collapsed to the ground. When they regained their composure, they hurriedly searched for the 2 children. Finally, they found the 3-year-old son and 10-month-old daughter in the bedroom closet. The boy's mouth was stuffed with a cloth and his neck was wrapped with fabric. The girl's head was covered with a tightly tied plastic bag. Both children also showed no signs of life seeing this scene. Kim Bong-jae immediately fainted after regaining consciousness. He quickly called the police upon receiving the report. The police immediately arrived, sealed off the area, and began their investigation in 2003. When the incident occurred, DNA technology in South Korea was not yet advanced, so the police didn't find any useful biological traces through examination. They found that the apartment had only one metal door and all windows were tightly closed. The balcony railing showed no signs of damage, and it seemed nearly impossible to break in from the balcony. The food prepared for dinner was still intact, and no valuables in the house were missing based on the scene. This is probably not a murder, but something Park Ji did to herself, because if someone had been strangled while conscious, their first reaction would certainly have been to struggle fiercely to save themselves. This would have left traces at the scene, but in reality there were none, and Park Ji's fingernails were quite clean. The forensic examiner concluded that the two children had died from suffocation with the time of death around 300 p.m. The police initially speculated that Park Ji-ae had killed her two children and then did the same herself. Based on this assumption, the police interviewed residents living on the 7th floor of the building. They wanted to find out if anyone had seen Park Ji-ae before the incident occurred and if they had noticed any unusual behavior. A neighbor reported that Park Ji-ae rarely went out except for GR grocery shopping and was always polite when meeting neighbors around 10 a.m. On the day of the incident, she had seen Park Ji-ae returning home with her two children from shopping. At that time, the neighbor was about to go out. They greeted each other and she didn't notice anything unusual. Another neighbor said that due to weak legs, she rarely went out and her children weren't around. However, Park Jae often showed concern for her, worried about her difficulty going out. So, whenever she went shopping, she would buy things for the neighbor. The neighbor said she was very fond of Park Jae, feeling like she was her own daughter on the day of the incident. This neighbor had been home all day and hadn't heard any unusual sounds from next door. Only in the afternoon did she vaguely hear the sound of a TV program with the volume a bit loud. However, this wasn't unusual, as Park Ji-ae often watched TV with her children at home. When she learned of Park Ji's death, the neighbor felt deeply saddened. Unfortunately, after taking statements from the 7th floor residents, the police still hadn't found any noteworthy clues. However, on the second day after the incident, the forensic examiner conducted a more detailed examination and discovered that the boy hadn't died from suffocation. There were clear wounds on his head and chest, and the cause of death was severe beating. Therefore, the conclusion that Park Ji-ae had killed her children and then did the same herself was shaken. These wounds didn't seem like they were inflicted by a mother. If so, this case was indeed a home HDE, but the main door and windows were intact with no signs of outside intrusion. So how could the perpetrator have committed the crime without damaging the scene and leaving no traces of the victim's struggle? The police then began to question the victim's husband, Kim Bong-jae. He stated that his wife was usually cheerful and optimistic, treated everyone around her well, had no bad habits, had a relatively simple social circle, and was in good mental condition. Therefore, she couldn't have senselessly killed her children in such a cruel manner and then committed suicide. He said that he and his wife were college classmates, had been in love for many years, and married right after graduation. After marriage, they had a son in February of that year. They had another lovely daughter to better care for the children. His wife chose to quit her job and stay at home. As a homemaker on the day of the incident, he went to work as usual and didn't feel anything unusual about his wife. It was only when he returned home from work that he discovered the situation along with his wife's close friend, Lee Yoon-go. The police then went to Kim Bong-jae's company to investigate. According to his colleagues, on the day of the incident, Kim Bong-jae was at the company all day and didn't go out. A close friend said that Kim Bong-jae had a happy family and was always envied by others. He always treated his wife and children gently and thoughtfully, and sometimes prepared surprises for them. Therefore, he absolutely couldn't have harmed his family. So Kroyan had no reason to do so after the investigation. Since Kim Bong-jae had a reliable alibi, the police ruled him out as a suspect. Next, the police examined the surveillance cameras in the building's elevator to look for clues. The time of the victim's death was around 3 p.m., so they focused on observing the period before and after that time. As a result, they quickly discovered a noteworthy clue. The surveillance camera showed that at 1 p.m. that day, a woman around 30 years old entered the building and exited the elevator on the 7th floor. The police immediately recognized the person in the video. It was the woman who had stood beside Kim Bong-jae on the day of the incident, and she was Lee Young-hyo, the victim's close friend. The police clearly remembered that when they arrived at the scene after receiving the report, They saw Leong Hyo crying incessantly and appearing extremely distressed. Their relationship seemed very good, and her emotions appeared very genuine, so no one suspected her. After obtaining this clue, the police immediately began to question Leong. She stated that she was 31 years old, was a close friend of the victim, Park Ji-hye, and lived in an apartment near the victim's home. They were high school classmates, but during their school years, their relationship was quite normal. After graduation, they lost touch until 2 years ago. They met again at a class reunion and began to keep in regular contact, and their relationship grew closer after that. Leong Hyo moved to live near Park Ga's home, and she often visited Park Ga's home weekly, faced with the police's question about her appearance on the 7th floor where Park Ji-hye lived on the day of the incident. Leong Hyo said that at 1 p.m. that day, she did visit her friend once, but this wasn't unusual, as she usually went there 3 to 4 times a week that day. Leong Hyo just came to chat normally with Park Ji and left. After a while during the interrogation, the police noticed that Leong Hyo frequently made a small gesture of hiding her hands in her sleeves. Although it was winter, it wasn't that cold in the police station, so the police asked Leong Hyo why she was doing this. When hearing this question from the police, Leong Hyo appeared slightly flustered. The police asked her to show her hands, but Leong Hyo hesitated for a long time before slowly extending her hands. The police discovered clear marks on the back of her hands similar to rope friction. The palm was swollen and red. At this point, the police began to suspect Lee Young-go. They asked her, "Why did you go to Park Ga's home that day? And why is your left hand swollen and red-faced?" with this question from the police. Leong Hyo appeared evasive and didn't answer directly. Later, she said she had slipped in the bathroom while fixing something, but when asked for details, Leong Hyo became flustered and couldn't answer. The police continued to press, asking if she was involved in Park Ga's death. The next answer from Leong Hyo made everyone present feel chills down their spines. After a moment of silence, Leong Hyo seemed to transform into a different person, displaying an eerie smile. She admitted that she was the one who had killed Park Ji-hye and her 2 children. Then Leong Hyo even said in a challenging tone that the police would never find evidence to convict her because, according to the law at that time, even if a suspect admitted to the crime without sufficient evidence of the crime, the police couldn't arrest them if no evidence of the crime was found within 48 hours. The police would have no right to continue detaining the suspect and would have to release them after interrogating Leong Hyo. The police immediately went to her residence to search. However, there were no signs of repair in the bathroom, clearly showing she had lied to cover up the truth of her crime in the living room. The police discovered a mineral water bottle cut in half from the middle. Unexpectedly, this small item would become an important clue in the case. At the crime scene, the police had found the clothesline wrapped around Park Ga's neck with one half hanging on the door. If Park Ji didn't do that to herself, someone must have hung the rope and used the pulley principle to pull it down forcefully, but the top of the door was square-edged, making it difficult to pull and likely to leave friction marks from the clothesline. However, if a cut plastic bottle was placed on top of the door, it would not only make it easier to pull the rope, but also leave no marks, perfectly solving this problem. Additionally, in a corner of the living room, the police discovered a hidden diary when opened. The contents inside made people shudder in the diary. Leong Hyo had detailed records of what she had done. Even a few days before committing the crime, she had written her crime plan in small letters in the diary and drawn illustrations in the diary. She had also promised to end Park Ga's life. By the end of 2003, the diary recorded that she had visited the victim's home many times to observe before committing the crime, what tools she needed to prepare, how to carry out the act. All details were recorded. It turned out that although Leong Hyo and Park Ji-hye appeared very close on the surface, the reality was not so. Leong Hyo had wanted to act for a long time, but due to unexpected situations, she had to postpone the time of action. Therefore, the implementation of the plan was delayed as long as there was a possibility of being discovered. She would immediately stop the action and change the plan. Waiting for the next opportunity to arise from the inception of this terrifying idea to preparation and finally execution, Leong Hyo spent a total of 6 months. During this time, she had 2 opportunities but encountered some errors and had to stop. The first opportunity was 3 months earlier that afternoon. She went to Park Ga's home intending to carry out her plan, She asked her friend to play a piano piece, planning to take Park Gae's son to the bedroom to commit the crime, while Park Ji-ae was engrossed in playing. At this time, Park Ji-ae agreed to her request and immediately played a piece during a break. Leong-hyo went to Park Ga's son, bent down and whispered in the boy's ear that she had prepared a gift and wanted him to follow her to the bedroom. Hearing about a gift, the boy happily followed Leong-hyo into the room. However, just as she was about to take out the murder weapon, the piano sound suddenly stopped. Leong-hyo quickly halted. It turned out Park Gae's daughter had suddenly started crying loudly, so she stopped playing the piano, picked up her daughter and began preparing milk to soothe her. Leong-hyo quickly ran out, took the milk bottle and said she could help. Park Ji-ae, looking at her crying daughter, happily handed the milk bottle to Leong-hyo. She carefully prepared the milk, even testing the temperature on her face before giving it to Park Ji-ae. At this time, the 3-year-old son ran over, hugged Leong-hye's leg, and asked Koi about the gift she had mentioned seeing the boy. Keep asking Leong-hyo became a bit flustered. However, she quickly calmed down, sat down, and took out a lollipop she had prepared beforehand from her pocket. Leong-hyo had intended to ask her friend to continue playing the piano for her, but on second thought, she felt this would be too forced. Normally, she wasn't very interested in piano, and repeatedly asking her friend to play might make Park Ji-ae suspicious. Moreover, it was nearing evening, and Kim Bong-jae could return from work at any time. Therefore, the first attempt ended in failure. However, Leong-hyo did not give up her criminal intent and quietly waited for the next opportunity. A month later, the second opportunity arose that day. Park Ji-ae suddenly sent a message to Leong-hyo saying that her husband had to work overtime that night. So if Leong-go was free, she could come over for dinner. Leong-go certainly didn't miss this opportunity when she arrived at Park Gae's home. She planned to take the boy to the bedroom while Park Ji-ae was preparing dinner because at that time Park Ji-ae would surely close the kitchen door so she could act without being discovered after dealing with the boy. She would then proceed with Park Ji-ae. However, just as she thought her plan was perfect, Park Ji-ae said she had to go out to buy ingredients because there weren't enough at home. Hearing this, Leong-hyo offered to go along, but Park Ji-ae declined, asking her to stay and watch the 2 children. Park Ji-ae said she would return as soon as she finished shopping. After Park Ji-ae left, the boy kept clinging to Leong-hyo, asking to play games. Leong-hyo had intended to deal with the boy during this time, but on second thought, when Park Ji returned and couldn't find her son, she would surely become suspicious, and Leung's next plan would be very difficult to carry out. Therefore, Leong-hyo decided to wait until Park Ji-ae returned before acting. A while later, Park Ji-ae returned home with groceries, but what Leung-go didn't expect was that Kim Bong-jae had also returned. It turned out that when Park Ji was coming back, she met her husband downstairs. His company had suddenly canceled overtime, so he had come home early and they could all have dinner together. This was originally a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but Kim Bong-jae's unexpected return caused Leung-hee's plan to fail. Once again, the atmosphere at the dinner table among the 3 people was a bit strange, but the naive Park Ji-ae didn't notice anything amiss. She kept serving food to Leung-hyo and thanking her for watching the children due to the failure of her plan. Leung-hyo felt somewhat disappointed, but she tried to hide her emotions and not let them show at the dinner table. Finally, dinner ended. After returning home, Leung-hyo furiously threw things around in her living room to release her frustration. Remembering the affectionate scene between Park Ji-ae and Kim Bong-jae, at dinner she grew even more resentful towards them. She morbidly thought that those things should have belonged to her. At this point, Leung-hyo had completely lost her rationality. She swore that she would definitely reclaim what belonged to her. After that, she began to plot more frantically, even recording the detailed steps of her action in writing and drawings. Leung-hyo was determined that she must end Park Ga's life in her next attempt, but relying solely on her own strength might make it difficult to carry out the plan. After much contemplation, she finally had an idea. She thought about the bedroom door in Park Ga's house, realizing she could use it for leverage. However, she still needed a rope. Then she remembered the clothesline on Park Ga's balcony. Leung-hyo felt nothing could be more suitable than that clothesline after preparing Pring. Everything Leung-hyo even experimented on her own door. Imagining the scene of killing Park Ji-ae, considering that the top of the door was square-edged, the rope might leave friction marks when pulled, so she began to look for a solution, trying many methods but not being satisfied with any by chance. Leongo saw a water bottle on the table and had an idea. She took scissors and cut the bottle in half, then placed half of it on top of the door. At this point, the bottle fit perfectly with the door to verify her hypothesis. She experimented, and indeed the half bottle didn't fall off the door. Moreover, the smooth surface of the bottle made it easier to pull the rope. After completing all preparatory stages on December 29, 2003, Leong Hyo killed Park Ji-ae and her 2 children. She believed she had committed the crime very carefully and that no one could detect any flaws. However, she couldn't have imagined that the half-plastic bottle would become the breakthrough in the case. After obtaining evidence EV, the police immediately arrested the suspect. Leongo, knowing she couldn't escape punishment, Leong Hyo quickly admitted to her crime and explained why she did it. 2 years before the incident occurred, Leong Hyo and Park Ji-ae had met again at a class reunion. Leong Hyo had actively contacted Park Ji-ae and soon after moved to live near her. At that time, Leong Hyo was still single while Park Ji was married and had an outstanding husband. However, Leong Hyo always felt she was much better than Park Ji-ae during school. Her academic performance had always been better than Park Ji-ae's, and she had consistently ranked at the top in exams in Leong's mind. She should have had a better life than Park Ji, but looking at herself, she had nothing. No good job, no boyfriend, just loneliness. Leong Hyo couldn't accept that a classmate with lower academic achievements could have such a happy and perfect family. This severely damaged her self-esteem. From this, she developed intense jealousy towards Park Ji-ae Leong. Hyo felt her life wasn't going as she wished, so she didn't want to see others living happily. Either gradually, she developed feelings for Park Ji-ae's husband Kim Bong-jae and began to intentionally approach him. She thought she was not only more beautiful than Park Ji, but also much more capable. So why could Park Ji have him while she couldn't? Later, Leong Hyo sent a message to Kim Bong-jae saying it's a pity that such an excellent man like you got married. So early in her diary, she even wrote, "If I unfortunately pass away, I hope I can leave all my assets to my best friend's husband." Initially, Kim Bong-jae felt very uncomfortable with Lee Young's forwardness and considered her an improper woman. He even reminded his wife to have less contact with her. But gradually, Kim Bong-jae began to feel that Leong Hyo was a very thoughtful woman. Whenever he was in a bad mood, she could always notice promptly and comfort him as a result. Not long after, Kim Bong-jae also developed feelings for Lee Young-go by January 2003. Park Ji-ae had accidentally discovered an ambiguous message between the two on her husband's phone, so she began to feel suspicious. However, besides this, there was no other evidence, so she didn't confront them about it, but only secretly harbored suspicions and monitored the situation. After a while, noticing that Kim Bong-jae and Leong Hyo kept their distance, Park Ji-ae stopped suspecting. She thought she had misunderstood her best friend during this time. Leong Hyo still came to Park Ji-ae's home 3 to 4 times a week, and the two remained very close. However, the seed of jealousy didn't disappear from Lee Young's mind. On the contrary, it germinated and grew stronger. She felt that Park Ji-ae's existence was a barrier to her happiness. Driven by this morbid psychology, she began to prepare to eliminate Park Ji-ae. After all preparations were complete, Leong Hyo began to act on the day of the incident. December 29, 2003. Kim Bong-jae had left home early for work. Leong Hyo arrived at Park Ji-ae's home at 1 p.m. At this time, Park Ji-ae was holding her 10-month-old daughter and watching TV with her 3-year-old son. When he saw Leong Hyo, the boy felt very happy and ran to hug her. Calling her auntie, Leong Hyo sat down and said to the boy, "Let's go to the room and prepare a surprise performance for your mom." "Okay?" The boy happily agreed. Then Leong Hyo turned up the TV volume to maximum and told Park Ji-ae this was just so she wouldn't discover the surprise. After that, she led the boy into the bedroom. When she took the boy into the bedroom, Leong Hyo immediately locked the door, then used a piece of cloth to strangle the boy to death. During this process, she even kicked the boy's body several times afterward. She hid the boy's body in the wardrobe and closed the door. Half an hour later, Leong-hyo calmly walked out of the bedroom. She told Park Ji-ae that her son had prepared a surprise performance in the room and invited her to come and see, but she had to be blindfolded faced with her best friend's request. Park Ji-ae was completely unsuspecting. She wore a long dress and carried her daughter into the room. Leong-hyo immediately pulled Park Gae's dress up to cover her head, telling her not to peek when they reached the bedroom door. Leong-hyo asked Park Ji-ae to turn her back to the door. Then Leong quickly took the orange clothesline from the balcony, tied it into a noose, and put it around Park Ga's neck. She then took out the half-plastic bottle she had prepared earlier, opened the bedroom door, and pulled Park Ji-ae up. Perhaps due to maternal instinct during this process, Park Ji-ae was worried about the daughter she was holding falling to the ground, so she couldn't resist strongly after killing Park. Ji Leong-hyo was still not satisfied. She then turned her attention to the infant who was still nursing. Finally, Leong-hyo completed her entire criminal plan. Before leaving, she took away the murder weapon, the plastic bottle in Park Gae's handbag after locking the door. She put the victim's house key in the handbag, opened the bag zipper, then reached through the security window in the hallway and placed the handbag with the key on the table near the window. Then she closed the window and hurriedly left. The purpose was to create a scenario where no one had broken into the house. Leong-hee's cruel method of committing the crime was truly horrifying. After being arrested, the psychological expert's assessment showed that she suffered from severe depression and paranoia. Therefore, her thoughts and behaviors were very extreme. 1 year after the incident occurred, the South Korean Supreme Court opened a trial to Judge Lee Young-hyo, declaring her guilty of premeditated murder and requesting the death penalty at the court. The defense lawyer argued that the defendant, Lee Young-hyo, had always emphasized that she suffered from depression and paranoia. She had also voluntarily confessed to the process and motives of her crime. Leong's life had been tragic. Her father died early, and before his death he had an affair. Afterward, she lived with her mother in difficult circumstances, but no one really cared about her. However, her classmates seemed to have good lives. Therefore, she felt the world was completely unfair to her, despite trying very hard. At over 30 years old, she was still unmarried, living in poverty, and could only stay in a simple rented apartment. She had been under great pressure, both psychologically and financially, as a result. Fault, the jealousy, inferiority, and anger accumulated over many years suddenly exploded, causing her to develop evil intentions. However, the court held that the defendant showed no genuine remorse or repentance, so she should have been sentenced to death. Nevertheless, considering that Lee Young-go suffered from mental illness, the court finally decided to sentence her to life imprisonment. This verdict caused many people to feel indignant. They believed that Lee Yong-ha's method of committing the crime was too cruel and completely undeserving of legal leniency at the trial. Kim Bong-jae appeared very distressed. He felt guilty towards his wife, regretted his infidelity, and felt he didn't deserve forgiveness. Due to his unfaithfulness, he had indirectly caused this tragedy. However, it was all too late for the rest of his life. Kim Bong-jae would likely have to live with regret and remorse. 2 years after the incident occurred, Lee Young-hyo appealed to the Supreme Court and submitted a petition for sentence reduction along with a letter of remorse. However, the Supreme Court rejected the appeal and upheld the original sentence. 20 years have passed since the incident occurred, and Lee Young-hyo is still paying the price for the crime she committed. However, the pain of the victim's family perhaps can never be erased. This story reminds us that happiness is not a competition. Instead of comparing ourselves to others, we should cherish what we have and strive to become the best version of ourselves. Story 5. We'll be exploring one of the most intriguing cases in Taiwan's criminal history on December 9, 1999, around 7:00 p.m. A father and son planned to go night fishing under the John Bridge. From a distance, they spotted a fire beneath the bridge. Usually, this area was desolate, occasionally visited by a few sculpture artists, but rarely did anyone light fires there. Curious, they approached to investigate. To their horror, they discovered the burning object was a crumb LED human body. Terrified, they quickly called the police when the police arrived at the scene. They promptly examined the area and found that the burned victim was unidentifiable. However, something strange caught their attention. Despite the body being burned beyond recognition, the soles of the feet were remarkably clean. Was this a deliberate murder or an act committed by the victim themselves? After a thorough search of the scene and surrounding areas, the police found no containers for gasoline nor any lighters or fire. Starting tools even more peculiar, the victim's shoes were nowhere to be found. The area under the bridge was full of weeds and gravel, so it was impossible for someone to walk. Barefoot and still have clean saws, could someone have brought him here to prove this? Theory: the police expanded their search area. Sure enough, they discovered blood splatters on nearby pebbles, but the victim had been burned, so no visible wounds could be seen. Whether these bloodstains belonged to the victim depended on test results. Results for comparison at this point to investigate the case. The police's primary task was to identify the victim. Fortunately, the clothes on the victim's body weren't completely burned, and in the shirt pocket, police found a card. The card owner's name was Lin Ronglu from Zudong Town. To verify if the victim was indeed Li Ronglu, the police immediately contacted his family simultaneously. They publicized the victim's clothes and characteristics through the media, hoping to quickly determine the person's true identity. When the police called the victim's family, Lai Rong was worried because he couldn't find his younger brother, although the news from the police alarmed him. Deep down, he still held a glimmer of hope. He told himself the DNA test results weren't in yet, and an ID card alone wasn't enough to confirm the victim's identity. Perhaps his brother had once again luckily escaped danger as he had before, but what he didn't expect was that his sister-in-law, Leah Riom, went directly to the police station and told the police the victim was her husband, Lai Ronglu. She even said the watch that the police disclosed was one she had bought for Lai Ronglu. A few days later, the police notified the family to come to Shinu Air Force Hospital to identify the victim's body upon arrival. Lin Rongji circled the autopsy table many times, but he still couldn't confirm whether the corpse was his brother or not, because deep down he didn't want to accept this truth. However, Leah Rong's reaction surprised everyone present. She glanced from afar and immediately asserted it was Lin Ronglu, her husband. Typically, when a body is burned like this, it's very difficult to identify. Moreover, relatives coming to identify often hold on to hope. So even if there's a slight uncertainty, they usually say the victim might not be their loved one. Although everyone felt Leah Rong's reaction was unusual, there was no reason to suspect her at this point. They could only assume this might be the connection between husband and wife soon after the DNA test results came in. Just as Leah Rong had asserted the victim was indeed 46-year-old Lin Ronglu, after confirming the identity, the police began investigating Lin Ronglu. He had been a Special Forces soldier and was in excellent physical condition after leaving the military. He made a living as a truck and taxi driver, but a few years before the incident, he had a serious car accident, suffered a head injury, lost his ability to work outside, and usually stayed at home. Lin Ronglu had two main hobbies. First was drinking alcohol. He drank a little. Almost every day, if anyone invited him to drink, he absolutely wouldn't refuse. However, his family stated that although he liked to drink, he never caused trouble when drunk and usually didn't have conflicts with anyone. Lyrel's second hobby was raising dogs. He kept 4 or 5 dogs and often took them hunting when he had free time. Overall, Lyrel's life seemed quite simple and modest, so who would want to kill him during the interviews? Lyrel's brother and nephew provided the police with crucial information. Lyrel's brother said, in the 4 months before the incident, his brother was particularly unlucky and continuously met with accidents. Lin Ronglu had 2 car accidents, 3 fires, and strangely, wherever he moved, fires followed. Additionally, he was severely stabbed by someone for no apparent reason. Meanwhile, Lyrel's nephew recalled during that time he often saw his uncle carrying medicine. Li Ronglu said he had stomach pain, and relatives thought it was because he drank too much the night before the incident. The nephew visited Lin Ronglu and talked about his stomach pain. Lin Ronglu said every time he got injured, his dogs didn't bark, because normally these dogs were very fierce, even barking nonstop at his nephew. Therefore, Li Ronglu felt something was wrong. Lai Ronglu told his nephew that he suspected someone was secretly causing him trouble. Little did he know that the next day Lai Ronglu would be murdered. At this time, the police received shocking information from Lai Earl's friend. This friend revealed that when he visited Lai Ronglu in the hospital after he was stabbed, Lai Ronglu told him, "If I die, tell the police to investigate my wife." This information immediately caught the police's attention. They recalled Leah Rong's unusual actions since her husband was killed, so could she have plotted to murder her husband? Leah Rong and Lai Ronglu had been married for 20 years. Both were remarried and they had 2 daughters. After marriage initially, their married life was quite happy, although they occasionally argued. Lin Ronglu usually yielded to his wife. However, after his car accident, Leah Rihong's attitude towards her husband changed dramatically. This accident not only made Li Ronglu lose his ability to work, but also caused his health to deteriorate. Afterwards, Leah Rihong bought a small apartment outside and moved there with their children. Due to health reasons, Lin Ronglu couldn't work, so he used his savings to open a small restaurant for Leah R. Hong. However, she only allowed him to come when the restaurant closed in the evening to wash dishes. Another reason their marital relationship deteriorated was money issues. After the accident, Leah Rong wanted Li Ronglu to sell the family's land at that time. These plots of land could be sold for over 30 million Taiwan dollars, equivalent to about $1 million US. This was no small sum. However, Lai Ronglu believed these lands were family assets and couldn't be sold casually. Moreover, he suspected his wife was unfaithful, so he wanted to transfer these lands to his nephew. When Leah Rihong learned of this, she became very worried and angry. She thought not only would she not get a share of the land, but even their 2 daughters wouldn't have a part. It seemed Leah Rong really had a motive to kill her husband. Therefore, the police began investigating her relationships and call history. When checking Leah Hong's call, history showed nothing unusual except for a call from someone named Yonglu. 2 days before the incident, this call lasted 0 seconds. Seeming to have been cut off as soon as it connected, the police traced the owner of this phone number but didn't discover anything special. Next were her relationships. The police discovered she was very close to the owners of a car repair shop, 2 brothers surnamed Su. Coincidentally, police cars were also frequently serviced and repaired at this shop there. Therefore, the investigators asked the Su brothers to gather some useful information from Leah Rong. The brothers eagerly agreed. In the following days, they provided the police with quite a lot of information. However, strangely, this information was all related to Ly Ronglu, and all negative. For example, they said he liked gambling, was addicted to alcohol, and often fought with others, etc. But after verification, the police found this information to be false. Therefore, the police began to ECT the Su brothers. So the police came up with a plan. They deliberately told the Su brothers they had ruled out suspicions against Leah R. Hong to prevent these 2 from secretly passing on information. At the same time, the police also made a significant breakthrough in tracing the victim's whereabouts. Before the incident, on the day of the incident, Li Ronglu had visited 2 bars with hostesses, and the bar owner had a very deep impression of him because that day Li Ronglu had come to drink with another man. Later, Lin Ronglu got drunk. The other man didn't have enough money to pay, so this man told the bar owner, "I'll go out to get money and come back to pay," but the bar owner worried the other party might skip out on the bill, so he secretly wrote down his car plate number on the calendar. However, the man quickly returned to pay and took the drunk Lin Ronglu away. Unfortunately, by this time, a month had passed since the incident, so the calendar page with the license plate number had been torn off. However, because the bar owner had written quite heavily, the police could still see traces of 3 numbers on the next calendar page. Next, the police examined relevant vehicle information for comparison due to the special type and color of the car, combined with the 3 recorded numbers. Finally, only 7 cars matched this information. Among them, 1 belonged to Yonglu in Tontown. This clue immediately reminded the police of the call from Yonglu and Leah Rong's phone earlier. After investigation, the car owner admitted the phone and car were indeed his, but he had lent them to a friend who hadn't returned them. Yet the 2 even went to court over this matter. Currently, his friend named Leah Sharon was wanted for this case. The police immediately confirmed with the bar owner and determined the man drinking with Li Ronglu that night was indeed Liu Shirong. Soon after, Leah Shang was arrested by Kaohsiung police. The investigation team quickly went to Kang to bring him back to Hsinchu for interrogation. Surprisingly, during the interrogation, this person immediately confessed he had killed Lai Ronglu, but the ordered him to do this was Leoreal. Moreover, he revealed 10 other people involved in the case, including the Shu brothers mentioned earlier. These two brothers were cousins of Leoram's son-in-law. They, along with Leoryong, had planned a series of accidents for Li Ronglu. However, during the interrogation, Leorong denied planning to kill Li Ronglu. She said her husband liked to drink and often beat her and drunk, even coming to the restaurant to cause trouble because she couldn't bear it anymore. She just wanted to teach her husband a lesson, not intending to kill him, but her accomplices didn't say so. They revealed that Leah Rong had been planning to murder her husband for more than just a day or two for months before she frequently came to the Shu brothers' car repair shop and said Li Ronglu often abused her. If anyone helped her kill her husband, she would be willing to pay 1 million Taiwan dollars, about 33,000 to that person. Initially, the two brothers thought she was just joking, but after seeing her come to talk frequently, they were swayed because they were usually very close to the police and occasionally heard some details about cases. Additionally, they bought some DVDs about criminal cases to watch. Therefore, they began planning how to kill Lai Ronglu. In this case, the Shu brothers provided the strategy, contributed ideas, and even manpower. After the incident, they also helped destroy evidence. What's even more shocking is that the entire car repair shop, from the owners to the employees, even relatives and regular customers, were all involved. This car repair shop operated normally during the day, but at night it became a place for planning murder. Until August 1999, they began implementing their first murder plan, but even they didn't expect that killing a person would be so difficult. The first time, Leah Rong and the Shu brothers planned to stage a fake car accident to kill this way. Even if the perpetrator of the accident was found, the police could only charge them with hit and run. That day, Leah Rong made an excuse that her motorcycle was broken and asked her husband to pick her up when they reached the arranged location. A prepared car suddenly rushed out and hit Lai Ronglu. Perhaps the perpetrator still had a bit of conscience, so the car's speed wasn't very fast at that time. Therefore, Lai RL's car was damaged, but he was only slightly injured. However, unfortunately, when Lai Ronglu fell to the ground, he didn't pursue responsibility for this accident. He just said, "I'm fine," and don't report to the police, but his wife was still waiting for him to pick her up. So he asked the person who caused the accident to quickly drive to pick up his wife. But Li Rongo couldn't have imagined this. Accident was a trap carefully set by his wife, and his concern for his wife didn't make her abandon her intention to continue harming him after the first assassination attempt failed. Leah Riomholm quickly began planning the second. This time she still used the car accident trick, but just changed the driver. Just a month after the previous accident, Leah Rong told her husband she had left her purse at a friend's house and asked Lin Ronglu to drive her to get it. Midway, she found an excuse to get off the car so her husband would go alone. When Li Rongo drove to the designated point, the perpetrator crashed into him at a speed of 50 miles per hour, causing him severe injuries and hospitalization. However, he still luckily survived after 2 consecutive failed attempts to kill her husband through accidents. Leah Rong felt both impatient and angry. If they continued causing car accidents, it would certainly raise suspicions. Therefore, this time, Leah Rong discussed with the Shu brothers and decided to set a fire. They invited Lin Ronglu to drink at the car repair shop after he got drunk and went home to avoid suspicion. They siphoned gas from an old car and had someone carry the gas into Lin RL's house to set the fire. But coincidentally, because he was drunk, Lai Ronglu had fallen asleep in some corner of the house instead of his bedroom. When neighbors saw the flames, they promptly called the fire department, so the fire was quickly extinguished. Therefore, Lai Ronglu only suffered minor burns on his legs with no other injuries. The murder plan failed once again. Everyone thought Lai Ronglu got drunk and accidentally set his own house on fire. Meanwhile, Leah Ryong was feeling mad. Inside, her husband couldn't be killed by crashing, couldn't be burned to death. So she decided to use a more direct method, stabbing him to death. Until September 8, 1999, Leah Rong's maternal family held a traditional ceremony. She brought a bowl of tang yuan and a bottle of liquor home for her husband. She knew her husband was addicted to alcohol and couldn't resist this temptation, so she urged him to quickly eat and drink. But Li Ronglu drank half the bottle and felt the liquor tasted strange, so he stopped Saint drinking. It turned out Lia Rong had put sleeping pills in the liquor, although Lin Ronglu only drank half the sleeping pills, combined with the effect of alcohol made him fall asleep. Afterwards, she and her accomplices carried her husband to the yard, waiting until the night was quiet and deserted. The accomplices came with cleavers and hacked at Lin Ronglu. Frantically, they thought this time he would surely die after committing the crime. They hurriedly left the scene, leaving Lin Ronglu lying in a pool of blood. But unexpectedly, the next morning, neighbors exercising discovered Lin Ronglu in a coma. They immediately took him for emergency treatment, and once again, he managed to keep his life. This was completely out of Lia Rong's expectations. She became even more eager to take her husband's life. She told the Su brothers, "Let's poison him." At this time, her husband was still hospitalized. She told her accomplices to buy a cobra to extract its venom. Then at midnight, Leia Rong acted at the hospital. She injected the venom into her husband's wound, but unexpectedly, apart from the wound becoming slightly swollen and red, Lin Ronglu had no other issue. She angrily sought out the snake seller and scolded them, asking why this venom couldn't kill a person. She didn't know that the venom, after being extracted for half an hour, had denatured and lost its potency. However, when Lia Rong injected the venom, Li Ronglu clearly saw each of his wife's actions but didn't stop or resist the money. She planned that after her husband's death she would inherit the assets and then she would sell the land to get the money. This made Leia Shang very angry. Therefore, when he was arrested, he immediately implicated Lia Rong. Although the plan to kill her husband had succeeded, Leia Rayong couldn't escape the punishment of the law. The police quickly arrested her, although she always claimed she was a victim of domestic violence. Her family and neighbors all denied. This, the police also had no records of any domestic violence reports. Moreover, there were no marks on her body indicating abuse. The police determined her motive for killing her husband was money. However, in the end, the court only sentenced Lia Rayong to life imprisonment. To date, she has received a reduced sentence and is working as a patient caregiver at a hospital in Shainu. The murder case of Li Ronglu is a heartbreaking tragedy about human cruelty and greed. Lia Rayong was the wife whom Lin Ronglu had trusted and loved for 20 years, but she plotted to kill her husband just for money. Although Lia Rong eventually had to pay for her crime, the price was an innocent life and the destruction of an entire family as the rain gently falls and the night grows deeper. Thank you for joining me here at Mr. Sherlock Holmes. True crime. Stories remind us of life's mysteries and the importance of staying aware, even as we seek comfort in the quiet of the night. If you've enjoyed tonight's tale, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let the rain carry you to a peaceful sleep, and until we meet again, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night watch over you.